So hello, my friends. My name is Chris. The video is about to start. Don't worry, it's already started. You've clicked on it. You're clicking play, so it's already started. But I just have a quick favor to ask of some of you. I don't normally do these kind of things. I'm not one to ask for or beg for anything really. But I do just want to, make you aware of the fact that I am starting another channel that has nothing to do with Legends of Runeterra or card games or anything even like it. It's actually about football history. The channel is called A Bit of Football History, football soccer to you Americans over there. Which, fun fact, soccer is actually an English word that is a shortening of association football, which is what the official name of football is, I guess. So there you go. That's the kind of thing that you can find on that channel. And I would just say, if you are interested in history or, definitely football, but if you're interested in just history, to be honest, then please go and help me out. And I literally just started the channel. It's got one video up. So please go and check it out and help me out, just grow that channel. I'll try to be posting on that channel, every 2 to 3, maybe 4 days video. You'll see that it's quite different to my normal Legends of Runeterra videos, kind of more short documentary type style. So please go and help me out if you can, and let's get on to the video that you're really here for. But thank you all, and goodbye. Squirrels! So hello, and welcome to another Legends of Runeterra video. My name is Chris, and today we will be going through my flaming hot takes for Legends of Runeterra. Let me just quickly explain what we will be doing in this video. We'll basically be going through some of my opinions that I feel aren't necessarily popular with certain groups. Now, some of you will probably agree with some of them, and these takes are kind of directed at different sorts of people. One will be, I disagree with the community about something. One will be that I disagree about, maybe the designers about something. There'll be a disagreement with someone. You might agree with some of them, though, but I would still say that, there is at least a group of people that would disagree with me on a certain topic. And so, yeah, those are going to be my hot takes. And so let's dive in. So the first hot take I have for you, and this is directed at some members of the community, not all, but definitely a strong portion, and that is that the RNG in Legends of Runeterra is more than fine, and is actually very good and very healthy for the most part. Sure, there are some outliers, for sure. We can, perhaps look at a new card that came out, like Loping Telescope, and, the RNG that when you get into random epic, that, there's no way you can play around certain epics, that might be like a tad too far. But for the most part, RNG in this game is quite limited. It's quite predictable in what it could be, and is actually quite skill testing in Legends of Runeterra. And I know that some of you are agreeing, but I also know that there are people out there that heavily disagree. But let's take Teemo potentially as a good example of what I consider good RNG, even though there isn't that much prediction to it. Because Teemo, as a kind of win condition, as a kind of idea, the puff caps and all of that, does still have some skill to it. If you're playing against a Teemo deck and you have a lot of mushrooms in your deck, you know that you shouldn't be drawing cards, otherwise you're going to die, right? And sure, the amount of mushrooms on each card is somewhat, unreliable, but again, there are still things you can do, like shuffle champions back in, or, if you've got any cards that will shuffle more copies or something back into your deck, then that can be helpful against mushrooms, because those cards won't have any mushrooms on at the moment. So there are still things that you can do. And what I would say about things like Teemo is it's much more fun for the person doing it than it is to be on the receiving end when you're losing to it. The person gains the fun. The amount of fun balance in here is like, it's a bit miserable to lose to a Teemo deck, particularly, if you get really high rolled, of course, then that is a bit miserable. But the fun that you have when it comes off is a lot of fun. And so therefore it's fine, because there's more fun being had when you're playing it than people suffering anti-fun against it. And that's what I think most of the RNG in Legends of Runeterra comes from. And as we saw in the World Championships, with the flash bomb that came from Alan ZQ, got a flash bomb and that won him the game. Things like that are very crazy to view as a user, and I'm sure for Alan he was going crazy when that happened. If you haven't checked out the world's final games, then you should go and check them out because they were good games. And yeah, Things like that, and on the whole, RNG is very well done in Legends of Runeterra. Now, this one I feel like, will be more divisive as a whole. Again, there will always be some of you that agree with some of these takes, but that is that some of the cards in the latest expansion are not as strong as perhaps I think most people believe that they are. And a couple cards that I'm talking about are Scion and Minimorph. Now, don't get this twisted at all. If I could find Minimorph. There it is. Don't get this twisted at all. I'm not saying that these are bad cards. In fact, Scion, I would say, is very clearly the third best champion that came out in this expansion. But to me, it's very clear that Poppy and Nami are on a different level than Scion. And Scion, as a card in himself, isn't that great. He is benefiting, in my opinion, heavily from the fact that there was already this kind of setup for a discard Piltover and Zorn Noxus deck, with Draven, who's already one of the strongest champions. I believe that, that deck is really helping Scion as well. And if Scion and his package came out and there wasn't any extra support for it already in the game, then no one would even think that Scion was a good champion at all. People would just think that this card was not good in any way, shape, or form. And, even if he actually is pretty decent as a whole, right? That's my take, and the same can be said for Minimorph. Now, don't get me wrong, I made a whole video on this about I do think Minimorph will get nerfed in the future, don't get me wrong, because essentially it's just annoying to play against, but the power level of the card isn't that great. The problem with this card is that, I'll say it just once more very quickly, that it's just too polarized. Against some things it wins you the game, and against other things it's a completely dead card. And when you have cards like that see play, that's a problem, because you feel like if you're on the losing end of that and you drew your Minimorphs, you feel like, well, this is a useless card, why is this here? And if you lose 2 Minimorph, you feel like, well, I had no option to respond, I couldn't have done anything, they just had Minimorph, well done, you stopped my win condition, great job, you had a card in your deck and you drew it. And there's no skill to that, or there's nothing really that you could have done about it. So Minimorph, again, I think should be nerfed, but I don't think that the power level of either Minimorph or Scion is as high as most people would put them down. This one I feel like quite a few people would disagree with, and that is that most of the nerfs that happen to Targon are absolutely fine and should not be reverted or changed back in any way. Now, there are some that I'm sure we can all agree, mostly about that, like Pale Cascade might be a good instance that, you don't see too many people calling for reverts to something like that, but there are others that people definitely do call for reverts. Obviously, Aphelios would be one. Another one would be the Veiled Temple. There are others like some of the Celestial cards down here, like the Snake, the Serpent. To me, most of these, sure, Aphelios probably needs a buff in some way, like he could use with the moon weapons being slightly better, but he definitely doesn't need a revert, because again, he'll just become probably the best champion in the game straight away. The Veiled Temple is another one. The Veiled Temple does not need a buff in any way, shape, or form. Most of the power of that card is in the fact that it gives you the 2 mana back, not in the fact that it gives one of your units a buff. That was just a nice added bonus. And if the game slowed down, the Veiled Temple would be good again. The Serpent was an insane card, like a literally insane card, and is still most of the time a pretty good option because it's a 0 mana card. The fact this ever came out as a 2/1 is kind of a shock, to be honest. And it definitely should not be changed back. This is a nerf that is definitely deserved. And I could go on and on and on about a lot of the Targon nerfs that happened and say that I absolutely agree with them. Obviously, there are some that we'll all agree on, like Hush or something, but I think most of them I would agree on. Star Shaping is perfectly fine. I mean, it's still a good card, right? Even a heal 4. And I think I could say the same for almost all of the nerfs. Sure, maybe like if you wanted to revert like 1 or 2, maybe you could make the Fangs a 3/2. That was one that I think is kind of like, okay, sure, whatever. That's one that I'm okay with reverting. I think that would be fine. Personally, I mean, Targon has another good 4-drop that also has lifesteal, so it's not like the end of the world either way, I don't think. But either way, I would say that most of the nerfs in Targon are absolutely fine, and personally, I would like to see different things in Targon be a bit better. Buffs to Nightfall, buffs to Soraka, buffs to Malphite, buffs to Daybreak. These are the things that if I could choose, I would say let's buff these instead of reverting the cards that I already know can be pretty toxic when they're good to play against. Now, this one I'm sure that actually most of the people watching this video will agree with me with, but actually probably game designers would be more reluctant to agree with this point. And this hot take is that it is absolutely fine to nerf things right before a big tournament. It is absolutely no problem whatsoever to feel like you have to nerf something before a tournament, and we saw this with the World Championship in Legends of Runeterra when we got the hotfix, when we got the likes of the Rune Runner change and the Merciless Hunter change and Shapestone, and those, what was it, 5 cards that got changed in that hotfix, completely opened up the meta to everything else. And those decks, were mostly still viable. Sivarakshan is still a very viable deck. It still could be played. It might have needed to be tweaked a bit, but mostly it was still a-okay, don't worry about it. These are good things. Now, notice my key wording though. It's fine to nerf things before a big tournament. I wouldn't recommend buffing things though, because when you buff something, if you make it too good, let's assume that they, did a Lee Sin buff right before a tournament, and that just became dominant. That might be unfair because some people, might have just discovered that the buff that you made, was too far and it's just broken. And some didn't, and so, the ones that brought it won and the ones that didn't lost. That's maybe a bit too far. But for nerfing things, it's absolutely fine, because when you nerf things, generally the things that were just below the things that were top move to the top, and so most people can have still a pretty good understanding of what is going on, but there's more question marks, there's more openness, there's more variety in a tournament format, because not everyone knows exactly what the best deck is and exactly what the second best deck is. And so you open up some, room for interpretation. But generally, people still have a pretty good idea. So I think it's absolutely fine, and more companies and more games should commit to, before big tournaments, if something's too good, nerf it. It's absolutely fine. Nerf it, a week, 2 weeks before a tournament. No problem whatsoever, and the tournament will be much better off for it, because instead of getting, the same thing over and over again in a certain metagame, instead you open up all the possibilities to a much fresher, new interpretations of what the meta is, and you'll get a much better tournament for it. And my final hot take in this video will be that the latest expansion wasn't that good. What do I mean by that? Well, if you have listened to, I've heard it come from, quite a few of potentially the top, content creators in Legends of Runeterra, Mogwai, Swim, Lobster, those kind of people, all saying that this latest expansion, they knocked it out of the park. It was a wonderful, wonderful expansion. Sure, there was some problems. There's always going to be some problems. But for the most part, they knocked it out of the park. Here's my opinion on this. Personally, I don't think it was a bad expansion, but I don't think it was a good one either. I would put it at, like, it was okay. In my opinion, what you got was what I was worried about, in that the dual region cards and the dual region identity of cards is going to be too tricky for them to find a good balance with, and I'm very concerned and worried that, by the end of the Bandle City expansion, that Bandle City, if not changed pretty significantly, is just going to be absolutely crazy busted, because we already have seen that the power creep in this expansion has been way more than perhaps any other expansion we've ever seen in Legends of Runeterra. The other regions that have come out have kind of started slow and then begun to be okay, and I'm worried that Bandle City is already the top region by probably some distance, and by the end of Bandle City is going to be the only way you can play the game. Otherwise, you're in trouble, right? Because as more cards from Bandle City come out, these things are only going to get better, right? We're probably going to get the odd, Bandle City Shadow Isles card that might help Darkness. We're going to get, Tristana's going to get a ton of support, right? And that'll be just another way that you can play Bandle City as well. There's going to be extra things for Poppy and Demacia cards. All of these cards are gonna get more synergies, more things to work with, as well as more of these cards come out. And if they're already dominating and they haven't maybe got all of the cards that they necessarily need to, be really good, then we're gonna have some problems, I think, in the future with the life of Bandle City. And that's my main point, that this expansion is fine. Yes, a lot of the things are playable, but if we just go off what we've seen before, where, both Shurima and Targon have started slow, but ended up being dominant by the end and needing significant nerfs on multiple cards, we're already kind of near that stage in part 1. You could probably argue that we are at that stage with Bandle City already, where multiple cards need significant nerfs from the region of Bandle City. So what is it going to look like by the time that Part 3 comes out if we just follow the trend? The average power level of card in Bandle City, just in this region, is far higher than all of the other regions. If we averaged out all the single cards in this region, the difference level is going to be immense. It really is going to be immense. Even small things like, the Poro in Bandle City gets to also be in Freljord, which makes it a lot more viable. It's small things like that where, the other regions all have cards that you look at and you go, well, that's not very good. But you look at the average Bandle City card and it is far and away better than the average card in the other regions. And I'm worried that, when we have a region full of those cards, that it's only going to spell disaster without significant changes and significant tuning, probably down of Bandle City, because there probably isn't enough time to tune everything else up. So we could be in for a pretty, dicey time, I think, when it comes to Bandle City, and so I'm worried. And also, the expansion was, it was fine, but to me, it's not a great expansion when it means that a lot of the old decks are just completely unplayable because they've just been replaced by all of the new things because the power creep is too high, and that's pretty much what's happened. So I am a bit worried and concerned about that. So with that said, thank you so much for watching. Those were my hot takes, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.